the managing editor for CNN International here in Asia Pacific, and I will be your moderator for the next 90 minutes. We're here to discuss one of the pressing issues that we face as government leaders or business leaders, educators, and even as parents, as many of you are here today in the audience. The topic we're here to discuss today is about Asia's next generation of talents and how we as a society have an obligation to provide sustainable employment for our next generation, for the next generation. Nearly 30% of the Chinese university graduate students will be unemployed. And now if you just take that number and scale it globally, you can only imagine what that would really look like, which is quite daunting. We're coming off of a worldwide global recession where the unemployment rate worldwide clocked in at 6.6%. I think everybody is very familiar with these numbers, and anywhere between 7 and 8% in the developed economies, even surpassing 9% in the United States. Now, you would think with all those people out there looking for jobs that the companies are really in a best position to pick and choose who they want to hire, but it certainly is not the case. Manpower recently did a survey about the talent shortage, and out of their survey they found 31% of the employers found it very difficult to find the right talent. And if you break it down to regions, Asia Pacific had the most difficulty, followed by the Americas, and then the Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And it really boils down to where it's not about the amount of people that are available, it really is about the skills that they possess and how there is such a shortage of people with skills that these employees and the countries are looking for, or the companies are looking for. And then, of course, you've got the knock-on effect, where then you start to question, well, exactly what is the kind of curriculum and the studies that are being taught to our students in our schools, and are we really preparing them appropriately to be hired in the outside world? Now, just to underscore just how important this topic is and how it's going to need a real multilateral approach to even get a crack at trying to solve this, the forum has put together an incredibly impressive panel here today. It is very diverse in the sense that we've got policymakers, multinational corporations, and academic voices. And it's also very geographically diverse as well, with people representing from Singapore, Indonesia, the United States, South Korea, and of course our host country, Vietnam. We're going to hear from each panelist. I'll be tossing a question to them, and we'll hear some opening remarks from them, brief remarks, and then we'll be engaging in a dialogue here. But as soon as we finish that, I'm going to throw it out into the floor for some questions. So I really hope you have some questions lined up. We really want to make this a very interactive process. But let's first start with our host country, Vietnam. Of the nearly 90 million people living here, 60% of them are under the age of 30. And of those demographics, they're quite literate, and they're also incredibly technologically savvy. And so as you have multinational companies coming into Vietnam to set up shop, you would think it'd be a win-win situation where multinational companies can come in and tap into the local market, and also you're creating in-country job creation. But what we're hearing is that it's just not the case. These companies are having a really difficult time to come in and to find proper labor. So let me first turn it to one of our host country chairmen. Chairman Tam, you're the CEO and chairman of the Saigon Investment Group, and you're basically sitting on a really golden opportunity here in Vietnam with this young demographic who is young, literate, and very technologically savvy. So can you give us your experience of how it's been for you to go out and hire in the market, and if you haven't been able to find who you need, what do you do about it?
Thank you, very good question. As you know, that Vietnam, we have 5 years ago, we have 80% population in agriculture product. But actually now, we have only 70% population in agriculture product. It means that 10% of Vietnamese population turn from agriculture product to service and industries. It means that Vietnamese government need to create the education infrastructure good to be turn people working from the agriculture to service and industry. And so, not only that, the government also permit the private sector to do the university before they don't permit. And also different education from primary and also higher also. But we still find difficulty for the company to find good people, good skilled worker to allocate in the factory. Yeah, because of the high growth in industries within the last few years, and also in Vietnam within the next 5 years, also difficult to find the labor and also university education also. And how to solve this? That is a very, very difficult question. But actually, in here, we would like to deal with the message that how to make the difference between the theory education in university and the experience graduate university, for example. Yeah. In Vietnam, normally in university, they send a student to factory to do the training. Yeah. But actually, that not make much meaning, make much sense. Yeah. Because of the factory, they scare of the new student come, and student not understanding their value, their future, and they spend less time in study, and they spend more time for entertainment, for example. Because of young people, all the time they like entertainment. Yeah. And in our case, because we also have the university in our group of company, we apply the new concept, and we also want to apply that concept to other cases because they're very successful. We have 20 industrial parks, and the factory industrial park they open for the student to come to study, to do the training by beginning of the year 2. And every year during the summer, they can do the practice, they can gain experience, and they can reduce the theory and the practice, for example. Yeah, of course, today we would like to hear from the other panelists also.
Great. Well, let me turn it to Chairman Kwak. Chairman Kwak leads South Korea's President Lee's Council for Future and Vision, and it is tasked to come up with solutions to position South Korea in a competitive position as it goes forward. Now, of course, everybody knows about South Korea's economic success, and we all know that it's due to a lot of the success that South Korea has been able to put into investments, human capital through rigorous education. So it seems like a very successful model that South Korea has, but yet you and the president has decided you need to embark upon a very aggressive education reform. So can you explain to us exactly what are you changing, why do you need to change it, and what are some of the issues you need to change?
Yes, as you said, Korea is one of the poorest countries in the world in the 1950s and in 1960s. And without any natural resources, Korea focused on developing the human capitals. And now Korea has become 12th largest economy in the world through these human capitals. Especially our zeal for education was the main force behind this development of our countries. But the important thing is that now we see the side effects. And today I wanted to say about the side effects. The first is that average Korean households spend 20 to 50% of their incomes on supplemental education, such as tutoring and private learning center. I mean, not regular public or private schools. I think it costs about $30 billion a year. It's a terrible amount. It costs arm and leg, and it has serious problems in Korea. And this cost has many economic and social problems in Korea. The first one is the low growth rate. Korea has a world lowest birth rate. I mean the birth rate, not growth rate, birth rate. And the Professor Becker at Chicago University won Nobel Prize, showing that the cost of raising children is higher than economic benefit. People doesn't have any children. I think this theory is applicable to Korea very well right now. The second is that the high cost of supplementary education is the household debt in Korea, and reduce domestic consumptions. I think it's very serious economic problem in Korea too. And last thing is that 84% of high school graduates enters college or university. I think the portion is too high. Maybe in European countries, approximately the average maybe 20% of high school graduate enters college or university. In United States, higher, maybe 40%. In Korea, 84% of high school graduates enter the college or university. We have a very serious problem with human resource development. Youth unemployment is very high because there is no jobs. Because there is enough jobs what they want, because they are so high educated. We have a serious shortage in labor supply and demand, especially in manufacturing sectors. So immediately we need educational reforms. Okay, I talk later more.
Great. Mr. Riady, who's the CEO of the Lippo Group, you are not only running one of the largest conglomerates in Southeast Asia, you're actually spending now a lot of your time, your money, your resources, but also your physical time in trying to nurture the next generation of talents. And you've certainly done quite a significant amount in contributing to developing schools in Indonesia, especially one of the largest private university of UPH. Now, you are certainly in a most unique position because you've seen the education side, what's needed in the education field, but also on the commercial side, on the business side, and what kind of employees you need. So can you, from your experience, can you give us a sense of what are you doing at UPH that is trying to bridge this gap?
Nation building is about developing our limited and depleting natural resources, as well as developing our human resources. So that's why developing the human factor, the human capital, the people are the most important. Yet I think, especially among developing countries of Asia, human resources development is actually falling behind. I take as an example of Indonesia, but this is the same with other countries. In Indonesia, only 2% of our population have the opportunity to enter into higher education, tertiary education. That means only 2% of our population have the chance to be in the elite of our society. And yet, just the 2% alone is already taking up 20% of our national budget. Can you imagine if we go to 10%? The government does not have the resources to be able to support that. Education initiatives in developing countries, in Indonesia as well, is still focusing upon the just element, that everyone should have equal access to have some kind of basic education. In the case of Indonesia, it is 9-year mandatory education from the primary school. It has not gone into the qualitative aspect of it. Only in the last 10 to 15 years, our education policy have started to focus on the qualitative side of it. So when you focus on the quantitative side of it, that means it's one size fits all, which means that those in the major urban areas are lagging behind. To get to the qualitative side of it, we are still in the early stages. It will take time. In education, things move very slowly because of bureaucracy, politics, because of the money as well. But yet that's exactly where the private sector must come in. Education system must be opened up for the private sector to go in. The private sector can show by developing new systems that the government says it does not work. Progress in advancing education in Asia has been very limited. In terms of just addressing the knowledge and the skill sets, I think we are doing a very poor job. I think Elena, you were talking about exactly that. But it's even worse when we talk about the education system producing the holistic, this element of education, the moral aspect of education. In the Eastern society, they say education is filling the mind, forming the character. I think even filling the mind, providing the skill sets, we're not there yet. Even more so when we are talking about forming the character. Developing the whole person, the life structure, a balanced life structure, we are way from being there. I think the structural problems that we find in Asia in education is first, the whole of Asia, it is still, by and large, rote memorization. So the concept of education is knowledge versus what it should be, a process of learning, creative learning, deep thinking. You have a lot of young people today that are not thinkers. And among them, those that are deep thinkers are way lagging behind. We should be training our young people with the ability to think. So when they finish their university, they have the adaptability, the flexibility to go into different environments. But right now, you give them a specific skill set and a bad job of doing that. And so when they come out, when that job is not there, they cannot be flexible. So rote memorization is a problem in Asia. The second part is about large class sizes. You go to Vietnam, you go to China, you go to Indonesia, you're talking about 50 to a class, 60 to a class. We've got a problem of educating even 4 kids in our family. You think about 60 in a class, that's really very difficult. There's also a problem with the teachers. There's a shortage in the number of teachers, and they have inadequate training and experience. They are not well paid. So I think in the whole aspect, we've got a crisis in the belief system. At the end of the day, the elite, the society, do not really believe that education is that important. The education system has been greatly damaged by John Dewey. John Dewey is considered the father of education in Asia, in China, in the United States, certainly. But John Dewey was the first one who introduced, who combined the concept of democracy and education into one. So introduced democracy, the spirit of the demos. So democracy, the spirit of the demos, means the focus is on the people. Demos means people. It's the people that rules. And so, at the end, it becomes a consumer-oriented product. It is the student that evaluates how well the professor is doing. So, that kind of a situation, the focus, the culture on me, on self, what is it for me? That is a problem in education. So that's why today, many young people, they finish university degree, they still do not know what they want to do with their life. Because their life has been taken care of, it's been so much focused on themselves that they've got a problem in what they want to do with their life. So talk about the gap issue. I think different countries have different situations. In the case of Korea, it's a different situation. In the case of China, it's a different situation. China is going from agricultural society into an urban industrial society. So they're trying to shift something like 60% of the population from the rural area to the urban area. They've got a different set of problems. But at the end of the day, the global situation is moving so fast. Changes are happening so fast. So we need the education, not knowledge, but a process of learning. One that gives them the master skills that will be able to empower them to adapt and adjust as they go out. The global GDP today is at $60 trillion. In 30 years' time, it will be $300 trillion. Can you imagine the number of people that is trained, that is skilled, that's ready, have that flexibility to think critically? There will be a major shortage. So in terms of developing the whole person, knowledge, skills, technology, experience, wisdom. Today's education system only gives them the skills. I think the corporates need to pick up the pieces and do more if we're going to be able to do well, to do all the other parts of it.
Speaking of corporations, I know, Jeff, you're in a pretty unique position where you're actually having the dialogues with all these corporations, and they're telling you, I'm frustrated. I want to expand my businesses, but I just can't find the talent, and yet I'm not sure if they're willing to do what they need to do, like as Mr. Riady was mentioning. So can you give us, and this is not only an Asian issue, this is a global issue, isn't it?
Right, this is a global issue that has been going on for some time. And typically at the peak of a cycle, you would find that it becomes very acute. Lots of problems are brought forward, and there are these major attempts to try to solve some of these issues. What we are finding is that if you really look at the speed in which companies are being driven to perform at now. The gross margins have been squeezed, their net margins are squeezed, they have global competition, they have competition from places they've never thought they would have competition from before. One of the ways that they have combated that is to become very specific in the skills that they need, because the more specificity you have, the faster you can create productivity. So as the education system and the training system is putting out people, it is not keeping up with the pace of what the organizations are dealing with. But the fact is, that was never true. When there was large drop forgings and steel industries, you would hear the steel companies say the same thing. Except what could happen is that the individual really could go more on a path that had a longer journey to it. They could try to do some training and education that might last 5, 6, 8, 10 years. Right now what's happening is skills are becoming antiquated quickly. So what we are seeing that companies are doing is they want to pick the absolutely perfect person. That's how you get this conundrum of massive amounts of unemployment. The United States, 10% unemployment, and yet you have 14% of the companies saying, I can't find anybody that I need. In Japan, in our recent survey, 76% of the companies said they cannot find the people that they need in order to succeed. What companies now need to be doing is to what we call identifying what is teachable and what is not. If they can clearly identify what is teachable and that person has the ability to be taught that, they can come up to speed a lot more quickly. And back to the point, as a result, the individual has to be willing to learn. And one of the things we have found in our research is that most individuals really feel as though they've learned once, now what they'd like to do for the rest of their life is just do that. And it's no longer acceptable. So the whole notion of having a mindset of lifelong learning, bringing on the challenges and being able to say, yes, I am adaptable. Yes, I will really adapt to this situation and take on individual responsibilities. And what we have found, and I think one of the most classic is what Shanghai has done in our work with the Shanghai government, is to be able to identify individuals who can be teachable and learnable, companies on the skills they need, and the government dollars put there very quickly. And that's worked right now quite well, actually, for the Shanghai government.
I guess if you're also talking about lifelong learning, you're talking about also education that continues on even after the university, so this must continue even within the companies themselves.
Yes, and I think that what happens is, as we would view it, a university is a prerequisite to shape the mindsets to be able to be a problem solver. After that, you can do things with it. I would also say that what has not gotten enough honor in almost any country is vocational technical schools. And when you do not have a strong system of vocational technical schools, you don't have plumbers, you don't have electricians. And as a result, you get in Europe the Polish plumber situation. And in fact, these are very well-paid jobs, but what happened is society is discounting them. They are not giving them the same level of honor as graduating with a history degree from Harvard. And in fact, they actually have much more earning power in many ways. Those individuals can be trained and taught more effectively by companies because those skills are more incrementally learned once you establish a base. And I would say that really needs to be worked on.
I mean, talking about skills, Annie Ko, who's the finance and dean of the finance and also the dean of the executive education at SMU. I mean, SMU is really turning out to be a very successful model, isn't it? I mean, where you're actually in a position where you're actually speaking to the businesses. And you've created a very good model where I would like you to share with us, and where you're actually giving your students the knowledge and the experience. So you're actually putting your students in jobs even before they actually receive their diplomas.
Thank you. Thank you, Ileana. I really love this conversation on this panel, and I think this panel is actually for the future. This panel will be for the youth of Asia. And I liked what James was sharing earlier, the inadequacies of some of our universities. So I am going to defend the university a little bit, James. Yeah? I think 10 years ago when SMU came about, the Singapore government also felt the challenge of one size fits all, because I think the university graduates cannot meet the needs of the industry very well. And we hear from the industry that many of our Asian students are technically competent. They are very strong in the sciences, in the math, so strong engineering skills, but they do not have the strong soft skills. And what do I mean by soft skills? They will need to be working with teams from different culture, different countries. The ability to communicate and articulate, the ability to work as a motivator, influencing the teammates that they are working with. So how do we, capture that set of soft skills? So what SMU did was we followed a little bit of the American system. We do not think that any one country system will fit the culture and the quality and the talent of a country. So we believe in hybrid systems. So we follow a little bit of the broad-based American education system, and then we have 6 schools that come about. 2 of them need professional skills. So you have the accounting school and the law school, and those requires you to understand the accounting needs and the legal needs of the country that you'll be serving. Then, of course, we have the econ school, the social science school, and the info systems school. I'm the associate dean of the Lee Kong-Chian School of Business, but in addition to that, I hold the dean of executive education. So why am I doing this dual portfolio? They only pay me 1 pay, but dual portfolio. And the reason is very simple, because the executive education hat that I wear makes me very close to the industry. They can come back, my corporates that we train, come back and tell us exactly what are some of the challenges in the industry. So, and the undergraduate hat that I wear allows me to bring back the instructions, the knowledge that I have from the corporate world, and tell my curriculum committee, what can we do to change the curriculum fast enough so that it makes our graduates relevant. I think in addition to that, I like what James said about value system. Most of our students have to serve 12 weeks of their curriculum time to give back to community. And in addition, they must have internship programs with corporates, just like what Chairman Tam was mentioning. So they do get out to the industry, and then they come back and continuing with their education. So we were trying to try different models and be flexible. My only challenge is it's very difficult to scale. SMU have the privilege of being a city university, but we have very small population. We currently could only have 6,000 in our undergraduate across 6 schools, and steady state, we go up to about 10,000. I want to share something which is very dear to me. About 4 years ago, 2006, we launched something called the Commodities Trading Track. And this was a partnership between government, private sector, and academia. One of our agencies, International Enterprise Singapore, came to us to show us a survey where Singapore is a port. We actually have our reason for existence because we were a port that was very effective for global trade. But in the last 10 years, we could not find talent to feed into the commodities trading sector because many of our talent joined the banking sector. So Singapore became a financial center, and we lost some of our roots of existence. We were meant to be a port, which means that our students should learn about bringing food, agriculture products from Vietnam to cocoa blanching to become, consumer products. And our talent do not know how to do this anymore. So what did we do? We have 20 industry partners who came in and fund a new track together with the government putting money on the table, and they give us scholarships. So now we have an international commodities trading track where the students learn about shipping business, trade finance, derivatives, specifically commodities derivatives, all right? And then what else do they do? We attach them to Bungie. We attach them to Trafigura, Noble, Olam. And suddenly I have 100 students who do not know what an agricultural plantation looked like. They are now learning from roots again about how to get back to the track and how to get back to what Singapore should learn well, how to be a trading hub. So we love the partnership that we are doing with government and with the private sector.
Great. I'm going to try to bring in David Tai here because he's one of the young entrepreneurs here in Vietnam. You're also the CEO and founder of Viet Thai International, which is a consumer retail company. I was quite impressed by your story. You say you started your company with $700 US, and now you lead an employment of 2,700 employees.
Correct.
How has it been for you to find the talent that you need?
Well, I think before I answer that question, I just want to touch on something that James talked about. I mean, what James said, I think, which is the key point here, is that it's still very early. So while we have academia, as thought leaders and basically leading initiatives in terms of how do we build this foundation for education, higher sciences, skilled labor, so on and so forth. My perspective is a bit different. My perspective, of course, that's where academia plays and where policymakers play. But in terms of the question of, do you shape the world around you, or are you shaped by the world around you, is something that's very critical. As an entrepreneur with $700, you're forced to shape the world around you. So how did I find the talent? The talent was there, and it was really a perspective of, again, I'm not talking about skilled labor or going down into science or semiconductor manufacturing, but the talent was already there. It's abundant. So again, I'm not addressing the issues of quantity over quality, but the talent was already there. So it was really a question about how do you unlock that potential. And really, this is something that Annie and I think both James talked about in terms of the soft elements, in terms of the hearts and minds, in terms of the passion and the vision. So the talent is there, the ambitions are there, the hearts and minds are there. It's not a people problem, it's a process problem. So in terms of process, it is not a situation of garbage in, garbage out. It's a question of, you've got talented, motivated, and very ambitious people who excel all across Asia, whether it's in education, whether it's in management. What can we do to actually convert and unlock that potential? I have people in the company today who are top managers, and while they have not been formally trained in management, they are the best in their class and best in their industry. We obviously, in one aspect that we do, is we access real estate, and to this day, we still have not found any formal institutions that focus on real estate are capable of doing what we're doing, and it's a very small team. And once again, what have I done to do that? It's very simple. I didn't have the tools. I didn't have the strategic tools of training and the processes. What I simply had was a vision. And I think you can put all the strategic tools in place, you can put all the training programs in place, but if you don't give people purpose, if you don't give them guidance, and if you don't give them a path to where you're going, the rest of the stuff is actually garbage in, garbage out. So I think in terms of recruiting, we recruit 100 people on a weekly basis, and we do that all internally. I'm glad to hear that we will soon have Jeffrey and his organization here and doing some great stuff. But that's exactly what we need. We need organizations that think that understand that this is a long game, and this is not a short game. You're not going to fix it overnight. It's obviously you need multi-sectors involved. You need the corporate sector, you need the government, multilateral effort, and across the region of Asia, you see the potential. So it really comes down to, how do you unlock potential? We're all sitting up here being very critical, which is great, and I think it's important to be critical and to scrutinize. But as you said, you're frustrated because you see so much potential. We need to turn that frustration into a proper vision. Where are we taking this? And obviously, the center of gravity is shifting to Asia. But the truth of the matter, at the end of the day, we're all optimists, and we're all here for the potential of Asia, of Korea, of Japan, of China, of Vietnam. So from my perspective, is every single person we bring in, we basically don't have to talk to them about what their future is. We just have to explain to them, this is what we want to do, and as part of our journey, we want to put you in this path, and how can you do that? And our business is definitely not cheap labor manufacturing. We're in the skilled side. We're obviously not on the science side. So, from my perspective, as an entrepreneurial company and from the corporate sector or private sector, I think the private sector, and I think as James mentioned, has to take responsibility upon itself. I mean, if you're looking for a one-size-fit-all or a perfect solution, at the end of the day, as leaders of our companies or leaders of organizations, we also bear some responsibility.
Absolutely. I mean, corporations have to bear responsibility, but also I think it sometimes always boils down to also about the teachers, about the educators. And I mean, James, I'd love to get your view on this, because it seems like there's a lot of incentives for professors and teachers. There's a thing that you say, publish or perish. There's an incentive for teachers to go out and do long, multi-year research and to publish, and then you get an incentive where you get the recognition and the position. And yet, do they have the incentive to put a student into a job placement? That's what they consider maybe something the career department is supposed to handle. And so what are the incentives for the educators to change their curriculum, to change what they're teaching in order to prepare their students for the real world? And what are you doing, or what's different at UPH?
Well, first of all, let me compliment this Aniko.
Thank you.
SMU have done a great job
Yes,
in exactly what we need in Asia.
absolutely.
Unfortunately, it is a new and young university. And I would say that almost all of the faculty members had their education in Western countries.
Some, not all of them. Yes.
And is it to transform an education system needs 18 years. You've got to get the elite to agree with it. And then secondly, you've got to train the teachers. And then to get them in the classroom to change them, that takes a long time. Then you've got to get to the students, starting from grade 1, then into the parents. Now, so, if you think about it, yes, in the short term, the companies will get by. We will adjust, as a gentleman said earlier. But at the end of the day, we need the government to get their act together to change things. Let me just say one more thing. In education, there are 3 pillars: the family, the schools, and for a lot of Asian countries, the places of worship. These 3 foundations need to be strong. When in the family, when you've got 52% of all the couples ends up in divorce within 10 years, one way or another, you've got a weak institution there. Mm-hmm. And then even those that are still going on are dysfunctional in some sense. You've got the schools we were talking about. Then you've got the places of worship that today, more and more and more, becoming more prosperity gospel. So again, it needs a whole broader perspective to change the whole education system. So for our schools, it's a little bit like SMU. We're trying to be establishing a model, not just for ourselves, but that other people can look at and say, okay, that's something that might work.
And what kind of the educators are you bringing, Annie, into your school system? Because I'm thinking that like the commodities trade track that you've mentioned, then you've got to bring educators who have actually been working in the real world to be coming and bringing and sharing their lessons.
Ilana, what we did was we actually have 2 tracks in SMU. So you have something called a tenure track or a standing faculty. So again, we are fixated, as James pointed out, with Western-style education in many ways. And so we do have standing faculty who need to publish. But when we did the track, you notice I said it was a partnership, because no university professors know really anything about commodities trading. So what we did was we engaged with the industry. We did team teaching. We had people who are passionate about not only putting money on the table, the commodities traders themselves say, okay, I'll spend my Saturday coming in. Can your students invest their weekend to learn? But of course, the students recognize that this is a set of skills that will prepare them immediately for jobs with the industry. So they burn their Saturdays and they come in to learn about oil trading, emissions trading. So we do get to learn green and carbon, although we are a business school. And of course, in addition, they learn about agri-commodities trading, and STEMCore sent somebody to help us teach steel. So a lot of this talent that are being prepared for the market are being prepared by the people from the market, because the industry themselves believe that they need to take ownership as a partner for developing talent. So we do have a hybrid, and we must have that partnership. So in the same way, if I were to launch another new job track for service excellence in the hospitality business, for example, we won't be able to do this on our own. We will probably need university partners who are in hospitality industry. We will probably need people who run great Ritz-Carlton equivalent or Intercontinental Hotels equivalent to come in and do this partnership with us. And I think that's why I feel strongly the gap cannot be just looking at universities and say you are at fault. And the industry must also come in and co-shape the curriculum and come in as partners to the universities as well.
Ilana, I'd like to add something to that, because no doubt I think corporations and companies not only need to just kind of have a baton handoff from graduation to the business. I think that it should be something well before that, before the individual graduates. What I'd like to really explore for a minute is that it seems as though the individual over time is starting to understand that they have to be in the game. It's not just the institution of the university, it's not just the company, it's them and their commitment to maybe get a hospitality degree, but know that that hospitality degree is perishable, that it only has a shelf life of a short period of time. And what we run across, we employ now about 4.5 million people throughout the world. And what we find is the first thing that an individual wants to do is says, here's my skills, find a job that fits that skill. And what we're saying is, there's not many of those, but there's some of these. And we continue to get the reluctance of wanting to put in the work to upgrade themselves. And I don't know the role of universities, but I know companies really get frustrated with wanting to put money in, a relationship with the university, and the individual doesn't put in their effort to go along with that.
I would like to ask a few ideas. I think that now we know that in each country we have different system of education. And each country will have some good point, something need to be improved, for example. But actually now we're talking about it as a community will be rural in the future. And I just think about that. Let's say in Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia, or South Korea, for example. And if we have some institution or something study about the demand and supply. Let's say in Vietnam people, for example, we are very good in mathematics, in computer, for example. And in the area, the people are good in areas. But actually, where the popular subject they study. When I work in university, we think about that. What career I will follow, for example. And that's why some people, some students, they study accounting. Some people think that we need to study economics in the future to get easier to get the job. Some people think that's Vietnam developed country and we study construction, for example. Or in Singapore, you are mainly focused on the service and finance, for example. And students, they focus on study finance. But if we study the demand and supply from area, and students also understand in general, not only in their country. And so in the future, when the labor market open, and the people can move easier to each country to other countries to work, and they can maximize their capacity also.
Yes.
And easier to meet the demand and supply.
Because it's a migration of talents, you know, where we're trying to move from one country and trying to attract those talents as well. I know that Mr. Kwak wants to say something about the attraction of talents that South Korea is trying to do, because you just have such a low birth rate now, but you have these demands for talent, right?
Yes, as I said, Korea has the low birth rate in world, and so we have two tracks. And the first tactics is to take steps to raise birth rate in Korea, and the second is more important. Second program is to attract the skilled talent from abroad. And just 1 month or so ago, there are big change in Korea. We passed a bill to amend our Nationality Act. The main thing is we are going to permit multiple citizenships, Korean Americans or Korean Vietnams and something like that. And we can attract and retain needed talent from abroad, such as engineers and scientists. If we cannot increase birth rate in Korea, we have to import the people from Korea. As I said, the main strength was the human capital in Korea. So I think this human capital labor fact is very important in Korea. So our national policy has changed to multiculturalism. I think it's a big change in Korea. And we are seeing attracting a lot of attention in our region, especially in Japan and China. Watch out very carefully.
Now, I'd like to start opening the questions to the floor. If there's anyone who has a question. Yes, can we get the mic to this lady right here? It's coming over here, front row. Please tell us who you are and where you're from and who you'd like to address the question to.
Thank you very much. My name is Kristy Lee. I'm a managing director from Uri Investment based in South Korea. I would like to extend my sincere appreciation to the distinguished panelists for such insightful discussions. Well, actually, this is my first time visiting Vietnam, and it's a very short visit, and I'm really impressed to see such a speedy progress in terms of economy, and also to see the dedicated leaders here. But most of all, it's really impressive to see the people in Vietnam. Very efficient, very disciplined, and I see a larger pool of people with very good English skills. And I see much greater potential, and I can now understand why Korea is one of the largest investors in the stock market in Vietnam, as well as in the form of FDI in Vietnam. And I hope to see much more closer collaboration going forward. My question is to the leaders from the corporate sector from Vietnam. Is this differences in this labor force in Vietnam, is this something cultural, or is this something in the policy that you've been doing, or is it some kind of incentive mechanisms? Why are people more willing to work harder and willing to go extra miles? It's really impressive. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll take
David,
this,
you
I'll
wanna
take
take
this
that?
question. You know, you're definitely right. The glass is definitely half full from what you see. I think, once again, it's about optimism. It's about being able to have a future. Because as you know, the history of Vietnam, you really can't look back. You have to look forward. You know, how do I had constrained resources when I started the business. Again, we've mentioned $700. So it was not only about financial capital. I didn't even have an office. What transformed my business was the people I hired. The first one, the second one, the third one. And it took, and of course, being someone who had a foreign education, who was taught to think critically, I had to take a step back and really think, what is happening here? This business is growing, and I don't have formal education in business. I'm a philosophy major, so I'm sitting back thinking, what is happening here? And I'm seeing these busy bees working in the company, pushing it up. They're bringing me responsibility. They're teaching me local knowledge. So I would say it's definitely human nature more than, and then of course you have the cultural aspects of it as well. But you have the human nature who wants to unlock, he or she wants to unlock their potential. And it's really a secret sauce. One of the secret sauces of Viet Thai is empowering the potential of that human nature that wants to excel. Now, we do have, of course, again, academic and policymakers have to be there. The structure has to be there for the future. But the raw potential that goes into our company is really about the ability of our business to empower the talent the raw talent that's there already. Now, of course, as the company's gotten bigger, we have to think about management skills, we have to think about leadership, and we have to create a completely different role within our ecosystem of empowering that talent. But, so I would say, so the short answer is, it's human nature.
I think the gentleman over there had a question, the person in the white jacket.
Thank you very much. My name is Jean-Pierre Lehmann. I'm a professor, I admit. I think the situation has been described in fairly realistic terms. The situation is in fact, I think, much worse. I think that historians in 20 or 30 years will wonder why we weren't more aware of the fact that we're living through a global education crisis. It really is. I mean, what you're describing in Asia is better than many other parts of the world. We've got a whole bunch of issues, and I'll just mention 2 or 3 because one can go through a list. But we have a demographic time bomb in front of us. We've got a huge unemployment time bomb. We've got an education system that it isn't at all geared towards that, towards learning, for people to learn how to cope in an environment that's going to be extremely hostile. I think another element that we found, for example, with IT, we got that wrong. We thought IT would help education. Arguably, it's acting as a disincentive to learn, because you can learn so quickly passively, you're not making the effort. I think there's another element in the crisis that we're living through is the humanities. I'm delighted to see that Mr. Tai is a philosopher. I'm delighted to see you're a philosopher. We need far more philosophers, we need far more people studying the humanities, etc. This has been, the business skills that you're talking about, you need business ethics. And that you can't learn just simply from a calculus. And I think that this is something which is really going to require extremely urgent action, but which is not. So, we've got a G20 that's looking at the global economic crisis. It's not looking at the global education crisis. So, as I say, this is a subject that one can go on for a long time, but I'm warning people here that we have an education time bomb that's going to explode in a relatively short period of time. The only recommendation I would make is one, I presume, I don't see anybody from the World Economic Forum, but I presume there is somebody from the World Economic Forum here, that I don't know, I haven't read the Global Agenda Council on Education, but presumably there is one. And I think one suggestion would be that maybe the World Economic Forum could become the World Economic and Education Forum, and look at those two together in terms of looking forward.
I think we have plenty of people from the forum that may take you up on that offer. Maybe you can participate in that.
I just want to add something. I think you're absolutely correct. There is, one of my arguments is definitely there is a global crisis in education, not just an Asian crisis or a Vietnam crisis. But the one point that you touch is the apathy of the individual who's going through the learning. And this is exactly what Jeffrey was talking about this. It's also the responsibility of the individual. What we have here in Asia, in growing economies, is we have optimism. And that optimism is something that can overcome a lot of the critical challenges. And you will see the individual take charge because they're looking forward. And it's not a sense of entitlement. So I definitely think that's a very good point you brought.
But
I think that crisis was good for a lot of Singaporeans, actually, because in the last 18 months with the restructuring, people are now taking ownership of building up their skills. So there's now a vision of an alternative career, and the government is actually going to set up 2 adult education campus. So I think we mustn't mistake about a degree being the end of education. The degree is only the start of your education pathway, and you continue to have to upgrade skills. So competency-based training, which has to be done in collaboration with the industry, is going to be the next big thing for many parts of Asia. But because Asia is not one size, so we are seeing the education part of it, confronting Vietnam, China, but for Korea, Singapore, maybe Japan, we are looking more at the continuing education perspective and how to retool, reskill, so that you have a longer pathway. So Prof. Lehman is right. We actually have a crisis, but it's not a universal, one-size-fits-all crisis.
But the one thing that's universal in a way, if you look at Asia Pacific, is this whole, I think if you talk about education in Asia Pacific, you need to touch upon Confucianism in a way, because it's an underlying factor of how we are taught, where memorization, as James was alluding to earlier on, is what you're after, and degrees is what you're after. And yet, that's not what's teaching you the softer skills. That's not teaching you how to, the skills that you need today. But it's really difficult to uproot those centuries of philosophy and education. So you're saying that the crisis was good, and maybe there will be more vocational schooling, which is not as bad as people would think before, because your parents want you to get the degree in law or medicine or in others. So how would you say about Confucianism? It's so deep-rooted. How are you going to get rid of that?
Well, let me say this. I would say that some of the discussions that we've been having that try to match these technical skills or vocational is exactly the problem. Because I think, first of all, it's doing a bad job doing it anyway. But secondly, what is needed, I think, it's to give this, the ability, the thinking skills, and the creativity skills. I would like to say the Jewish education system, by the time they're 12, they taught about philosophy, history, religion. They talk about so many of those areas, and they have to pass the so-called bar mitzvah. It's broad thinking that gives them the ability to think, all over the place. And then after that, they start focusing on their own particular biggest strength, biggest talent. But in Asia, you've got a combination of both. You've got a lot that is thinking so broad. It is a master of everything, but master of none. But you have got a lot of other areas, other countries that have a system that is so focused on technical skills that the minute the situation changes, they cannot adapt. So I think in the Western countries, like Professor Lehman was talking about, they actually have been successful to train the people to think creatively. But unfortunately, perhaps, some might say that the direction of their life was wrong. The values was wrong. On the other hand, in Asia, you may have the right values, you may have the right ethics, you may have the right kind of direction, but we have not been taught from the primary school. Over here, we thought, okay, this is an apple, just take it, these 3 apples, and just take it as that. When I was in Australia, the teacher says, hey, we have a game. Everybody must ask from this basket of 3 apples. And so they start asking, where did it come from? Why is it 3? Why is it not 5? What's inside? And so on. So, there is a big difference in it. So I would say that I think in Asia, we're very fortunate because the Eastern philosophy, which is Lao Tzu, Kong Tzu, and Men Tzu, they teach us a lot of the right ethics, hard work, respect for elders, and so on. But I would also say that any place that more than half of the population, the women, the children, are put in a secondary position, that's not good education. And so this is something that must change.
Yeah,
Chairman Kwak, you want to add something?
Last 3 years, the most openly used terminology word is that convergence, hybrid, and fusions. And so I think there's much difference between Western and Eastern Asians right now. And so I think with the increasing pace of change, we cannot predict skills that will be read by today's students. I think this is very important. There is technology and environment is changing so fast. And the important thing is that if we equip them with the critical thinking skills, and the other one is the lifelong love of learning, I think we will have both the tools and the desire to equip themselves with what they need. I think that's what I want to say.
Yeah, I'd like to add that the difficulty with the university system and actually prior to the university system is that there are so many now new forces that are shaping the minds of children, young people, that the one size fits one for education is as much as it is for a job. And I can speak from experience. It is no fun having a discussion in our home anymore about a history question, because my children just pull out their iPhone and give me the answer in 5 seconds. Where's the intrigue of debating, is it really right or wrong? And at the end of the day, wrong most of the time for me, but the point is that they are learning differently. They are getting that intellectual curiosity. They're going to solving the problem. So before it was finding out who really started that war in 1850, we can find that out now on an iPhone in 5 seconds. The question is, why were we in that discussion to begin with? And my point is I think as universities get challenged with different groups of people coming into it with different predispositions, which is different than a 40-year-old who now has to be retreaded or retrained. And the ability to diagnose, how can I prescribe learning or skills enhancement to people who have different mindsets, I think will be critical. And companies try to do that, but they do it in a clumsy way as well. So I think what we're talking about now is maybe not enjoying this class of mind that's going to be entering the university system, which is actually expecting to be critical thinkers and problem solvers, and get bored with what I had to do, which was memorize the periodic table or something like that. And I think that that is going to put stresses on universities.
So the universities are the ones that have to change, but yet how fast are you seeing them change? I mean, Annie, I think you mentioned to me once where curriculums aren't just changing fast enough. We're still using old, outdated curriculum.
I think generally the structure in the university makes it difficult for a lot of universities to change the curriculum, but they have to. And I think in addition, universities should welcome executives in residence. Some of you may want to take a sabbatical with a university for a year, and you come in and you co-work with us as a research fellow, and in turn you get the experience of teaching the university students. And Jeffrey is right. The kids these days are not comfortable just learning about facts anymore. So the role of the educator has to change. You become the catalyst, you become the synthesizer, so you integrate and you let them learn the tools of learning. So actually, I think it's a wonderful, exciting world, and I do agree, WEF should take on a project which looks at how to cross the gaps between the countries in Asia. We have excess human capital, young capital, capital dividend in some countries. And then we have countries like Korea and Singapore who would love to be a partner to the inflow and then give you back again the outflow. And I think that partnership should be the conversation for East Asia because we definitely have a win-win situation here.
Personally, I think the universities in Asia have transformed themselves in quite a remarkable way. The problem, I say, again, is in the basic education. We have 35,000 white-collar people. We are all in the services industries, and we are in multiple countries all over Asia. Now, as companies grow bigger and bigger, the problems that we face are not the technical problems. It is the social, political, human issues that comes up. And again, so if they're not brought up at the family level, in the schools, in a place of worship, to be able to cope with those kind of issues, even the universities does a good job, but only 3 years and 4 years, we still continue to have a problem.
It needs to start with the family and your basic,
Absolutely.
your whether it's your church, whether it's a family, whether it's...
Think about it. You learn finance at home. You learn discipline at home. You learn the system of government at home. You know, how the father is this authoritarian or he's a Democrat or something like that. Everything is learned at home, the basis. The school might be teaching A, B, C, D, but if the parents are saying it's X, Y, Z, guess who is going to listen? So, you know, it's got to be that whole system.
We have a question from the floor.
Hi, David Arkless from Manpower, but I want to speak for 1 second in my role with the World Economic Forum as chairman of the Global Agenda Council on the Skills Gap. Out of the Global Redesign Initiative and paying attention to your comments about the World Economic Forum, we found a stream of convergence from a number of councils: migration, gender equality, education, company vocational training, skills gap, forecasting talent needs. And just so that you know, there is an initiative called Talent Mobility as a new project to be run globally, to be experimented with a project in various countries, sending, receiving nations, the education paradigm, gender equality, and building on great examples of, for instance, further education like Singapore, to actually scale some of those examples to attempt to resolve this huge demographic time bomb that's going to hit us and the cultural issues that Jeff mentioned. So we do have work in the forum attempting to holistically address this huge, huge issue. Thank you.
When will we see the results?
We're already starting to implement some of the project elements, and we're looking for great governments like yours, your country, and Vietnam to take part in a very big, very exciting experiment so that we can reveal the results of that trial at Davos next year.
Very good.
Very good. Do you have any questions from the floor? Yes?
Thank you. My name is Wang. I'm a director of NGO from this country, Vietnam. This is a really, really interesting panel, and I would like to thank all the panelists for a very interesting discussion. I just want to echo on James' point and also David's experience of lifelong learning. And I think the success of David's company, because one reason is that he doesn't really spend time pulling his hair to say, where can I find the right people with the right skill set and the right knowledge set? But he focused on the people as human beings other than looking at the knowledge and the skill sets. Because I don't know how many members of the panel, how many people sitting in this room doing what you are doing today because of the thing that you learned in the university. I guess not too many. So the thing is that the university or whatever education we do need to prepare the young people to be critical thinking and a lifelong learner. But at the same time, it is a responsibility of the employer to create the environment for them to prevail. Because if you are just looking for the people with the right knowledge and right skill, you don't find. And at the same time, you make the people feel not confident because they don't have the right skill and knowledge you are looking for. So this panel discussed a lot about formal education, but I really like James' point about education is not only in the school. Maybe when we talk about education, we should also think about not formal education, but education out there. Young people learn every day from the TV, from the parents, from the friends. And I think that is another form of education that we need to think about. So to prepare young people for employment is not only about knowledge and skill, but a lot about attitudes and motivation. The lady from Korea, they mentioned about the people in Vietnam. I think there's a lot to do with attitudes and motivation other than knowledge and skill. I'm not arguing that knowledge and skill are not important and essential, but that can be learned. But the young people can only be motivated to learn if they have the right attitudes, the right motivation, and the right environment. So, employer, don't blame too much school, but take your responsibility as well. And that will benefit you as David's company is benefiting. Thank you.
Chairman Tom, do you want to respond to that?
In our case, you know that we employ people depend on the heart more than depend on the brain. Some people very high education and graduate from the overseas, even from famous university. We are not ranking higher than people study and the not famous university. We depend on the people who have a good heart. And when they have good heart, and they can burn their brain, it means that they will try to study. And I think that's your idea also good, because the people devote to study, try and work hard, and they would like to improve themselves, not during the university, also during their life also. And I think that they're more successful than the people who just only try to study well in university, but after that, they are not willing to work, not willing to continue study on their lives.
Jeff wants to.
Yes, I think it's a great point. When I look at a university, in our company, we think of it as a foundational piece of education and a way of looking at learning. We have, in our organization, how we develop people is called the 3 E's. Experience, exposure, and education. And we use education last, not because we disrespect the education. It's that experience that you can give an employee that's a different experience to help them learn. Expose them to a completely different environment and do many more what we call lateral moves, which younger people are more interested in lateral moves. It's not just up, 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 because you can't get the experience and the exposure fast enough. So what we do is we create all of our teams. We are a $20 billion company in 82 countries, and our corporate staff is less than 100 people. The way we do that is every major initiative, we create a team. That then gives the person experience on something. They get exposure to a senior executive. And when we then go out and survey the people who've been on that team, they feel as though they have improved themselves more than going to a 9-month Stanford executive MBA program. And that doesn't mean that we don't do that also. So clearly the companies have to create an environment that creates that exposure and experience to keep up with the absolute intensity of having to acquire new skills in a faster time. And so far it's worked for us very, very well.
I think there's a question over there.
Hi, my name is Akhtar Ahmed from Microsoft. I got my MBA degree from University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School of Business. My school has produced a lot of great world leaders and business leaders. But unfortunately, we have also produced some incredibly bright people who went to Wall Street and, let's just say, did some questionable creative things and showed up on the front page of Wall Street Journal for all the wrong reasons. So my question is around ethics and what role should universities be playing in terms of teaching ethics? I mean, I did take one class on ethics at Wharton, but I'm not sure how much impact it had at a broader level. Thank you.
That's for me, I assume. Yeah. Ethics is taught in our undergraduate program from day one. It was in a core. And I think the last 2 years in the MBA program, we've actually included that in almost every core module. So you could talk about the ethics in finance, ethics in marketing. So it's weaved into the core curriculum. I think if you read the weekend papers this week, there's actually a group of people, the MBA students, who have signed on an MBA oath that they are going to go out, graduate, and do the right thing in business. So I think in many ways, the crisis, we do not want to waste a good crisis. And one of the good things that came out from that last crisis, it's about the ethics part of it. And doing business right, I think it should be inculcated in everybody, whether you learn it from business school or any school. So I think that's a good thing that you brought it up to our attention, and I think everybody recognizes it.
I think business ethics is unfortunately required, but I don't know the difference between business ethics and ethics. And I think the course can sometimes be relatively short. Ethics is ethics. And one of the things that we ask our people to do is, if you can go home and tell your spouse, if you can go home and tell your children what you did today, and it actually be the right thing, that's all that matters. And I think what is happening is that we are creating, particularly on the financial side, this notion that I can separate out business ethics and ethics. And to me, a company also has to play a key role in that, in establishing what are the rules and what is the ethics of that organization, which are very simple. Because in my mind, again, there is no difference between ethics and business ethics. It's the way you go after business.
And it shouldn't also be left up to the universities to teach ethics, right? I mean, ethics needs to come, I think what James was saying, it's from the grassroots, it's from your homes, it's from your communities, it's from your churches. I mean, if you leave ethics to wait till you're 16 or 17 when you go to university, I think that would be a bit too late, don't you think?
Well, I think universities put in a bad spot. If the university does not have a business ethics course, you get a black mark on your capabilities. But at the end of the day, I think it's true. It's really not a university's responsibility.
You know, I think, of course, ethics is important, but I come from Indonesia, where you must have a religion. It's the largest Muslim country, but yet, you know, Christianity thrives there, Catholics thrives there, also the Buddhists thrives there. I think from a religious perspective, the question becomes, when you say ethics, what's the standard? If there's no God and everything is humanistic, that means I and you are the same, me and my son is the same. The truth is whatever we think is the truth. So in that situation, ethics breaks down. So I think from a religious school, education perspective, we think that this whole ethics must go back to the religious issue. It must go back to the moral issue. So we look at it, let's say, from a CSR. What is CSR? So I mean, from a religious perspective, we would go back and say it's not about CSR, it's about stewardship. The starting point being that what we have, even our life, our talents, our money, and so on, it does not belong to us. So then you have a whole different perspective and a deeper perspective about what ethics is all about.
I think I saw a question over there.
My name is Troy. I work for PepsiCo, so I think I have two questions. First of all, I will address to you, Annie. As I know that at MU, recently very young and very, I think it's very new, the curriculum you just bring to Singapore, actually a little bit American, diversify the whole curriculum. I think I put the context of the whole of our Asia now. We're talking about 30% of unemployed in the future from Asia. From your personal point of view, actually, what do you think that how can we address and balance the role of the government? Because this is a socialist country, the same as Vietnam here, and the private sector, corporate sector. How can you look at, what is your expectation to make a cooperation? Like recently Singapore, you do something with the private sector. This is the first question. Second question, Dave. For a long time, right? I think we appreciate very much what you just done in Vietnam. So what is your expectation of the same context of Vietnam? Every year we have 260,000 students and 70% of them unemployed for a while. Actually, maybe after that, half year or 1 year they can find a job. So you expect, what are your expectation from the government side and the private sector like ours here to make things better, in the future in terms of talent pool? And by the way, Manpower is the Jeff. You are now in Vietnam. So I think Manpower in Vietnam recently, I know that you also understand the situation. What are your expectations, the cooperation from the corporate sector to, the school to develop the talent pool for an environment like Vietnam?
Okay, I think we're going to have to keep our answers really, really tight, but do you want to start, Jeff? And we'll
Yes.
go.
We view our role as to absolutely be part of the training. Our main view is to be very close to the company and the client and be able to get an individual as quickly as possible into a job. So we are very prescriptive in our training, very prescriptive in our assessments, and we believe, whether it be here in Vietnam, China, or for that matter in the US, which we have massive training issues because of the disconnect between what's now and what's next in the labor market. So what we find typically, and it's a little bit of a repeat, is it is amazingly difficult to get the individuals to engage in putting in the extra effort to be trained in order to enhance their future. And it is a difficult issue for us.
Okay. Thank you for the question, Shai. From the aspect of what do we expect from the government, it's quite simple. I mean, we're not going to get into controversial issues, but we really would like to see the government play a stronger role in terms of guidance, in terms of clear long-term policy making to allow the non-state actors, whether it is universities or the private sector, to actually be more robust and holistic in their approach in terms of education and training. What do I expect from the private sector? It's really about corporate modeling. It's exactly what you've done with your company. You've created this fantastic organization with Pepsi that is a model not only for Vietnam, but also for a model for the entire region. It's the ability of organizations realizing that it's not only about economic sustainability, but really through the concept of thinking about method, imagination, and inquiry. And in terms of method, we've talked about some of the critical thinking of universities and some roles of the private sector in terms of the structure. And in terms of inquiry, it's what we're doing here in terms of our critical thinking. But in terms of where we play in the private sector is really the imagination. What can it really be? What can we really do in terms of building a corporate, social, responsible model, as well as what can we really do in terms of creating a corporate citizen that is a role model for other corporations? That's it.
Annie?
Thank you. I like your question, but I'm not going to talk about it in the specific context. I am a believer of collaboration. And I believe that, to create and stop this gap, different countries must work together. I would be more than happy to work with some of the Vietnamese universities. Banji was just telling me, Christoph was telling me yesterday, that he's going to build a new plant in Vietnam near the port, and he will be employing 600 workers, but he couldn't get them trained fast enough. So I think it's good to have a good heart, great attitude, wonderful Vietnamese people, but when corporates come here, they need the skills gap to be closed. And, you know, it's going to be driven by business considerations. So they need that done very quickly. I do believe that the government must work closely with private sector. So in Singapore, we are small enough, so we do not dare to tell the big countries what to do. But we are small enough to share that Ministry of Manpower cannot work in isolation with the Ministry of Trade and Industry, and including Ministry of Education. So if ministries work independently, it will not help the business, it will not help the country. So you need collaboration across ministries, across agencies, and then of course the public, private, and the academic partnership. So the believer of partnerships.
Yeah,
That's a good.
Yeah, that's good. Go ahead.
That's a good transition because I think we need to wrap it up now. But in order to bridge that skill gap, I just want to go on really quickly for 30 seconds. What's the one thing that you think is necessary in order to bridge that skill gap so we can, leave that sort of a conclusion before we conclude today? Do you want to start with Chairman Kwak? Do you want to start?
Yeah. I never heard the people complain that final remark is too short, and I keep my remark very brief. And I think, as I said, Korea is pursuing now multiculturalism, and what we wanted to teach, what we want to teach to students is that to cooperate and come together and harmonize our society. Okay, thank you for listening.
Chairman Tom?
I would like to add my experience in Vietnam, in the case of the unemployment after graduate from university in Vietnam. Just a few years ago in Vietnam education system, the Ministry of Education, they prepare formatted program, and they're asking different universities to follow that program. That's why students graduate from university and a little bit far from the practice and not much experience. That's why unemployment. But actually in Vietnam, they call unemployment, but not real unemployment, because they can find out many other jobs outside the factory, service, and something. But actually now Vietnamese government already permit the university, different university, they make their own program. And they need to study the reality, the factories, and what they need. And they prepare document based on the fact that the factory needs, for example. And also university also need to study the future of Vietnam and what economy will grow. For example, Vietnam is the production base. It means that we need to train the people to supply with the production for a factory, for example. And now I think that the student graduated from university is closer to the factories and closer to the demand of the factory. And that's why now, of course, anywhere you find difficulty to find employees. But I know that now much easier than before. Yeah, and that's why many more foreign investment come to Vietnam. If the fact that they get difficulty, really difficulty to get the employment, it means that how they can come. And you see, with the last few years, foreign investment in Vietnam increased, especially now high-tech company. In our industrial park, we receive 80% of industrial park in high-tech. Yeah, like Foxconn, Canon, but they still can employ the employee, for example.
Yeah.
East Asia can only grow if we pay attention to our human capital, and we have to do it together.
Yeah, I would say that to be able to catch up, I think we need to have a change of mindset, putting value that education is important, and that the private sector put pressure on the government, encourage the government, and the private sector themselves go into education. A lot of progress has been made, but I think we need to catch up even much faster. That means that it's all about the faculty, it's about the teachers, we need to spend money on them. But in the meantime, companies like ourselves, we should be patient, it will take time, so we would only focus on businesses that have a higher margin and would allow for mistakes, a margin for error. So that's how we've done it, and we're patient with them, and over time, they come up, and we will reap the fruit of this process.
David?
I think that's perfect what James said, and also what Annie said. It's contextual intelligence. It's going to take time. And I think the sequencing of what is it, I think the question of what, we all know what it is to do. How, I think that it's debatable, but it's going to be a question of sequencing, and I think what's going to work in parallel, and what goes first and what goes second, what foot do we put first. But it really comes down to the ability to be able to have that contextual intelligence and collaboration, absolutely.
And as David said, it's so much of the how, and I would suggest don't be timid, break some rules, make it iterative, not episodic. These are things that the hows are difficult. Go after them in a way that says, break little rules, get the government to get a little bit nervous about what their responsibility is, put some pressures on some companies, and try some things. These things now in today's world, you can be more iterative, and I think we absolutely need to be committed to breaking some rules for the student, for the individual, to try to get ahead.
Fascinating. Thank you very much. And I think that concludes a little, I think we've got a good snapshot of the issues that we face. Certainly, we're not going to be able to solve this issue, but we've been able to get some really great ideas as we got from all the panelists. So thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much for your questions from the audience.